We see this all over the place. All of the seeds, all the plants have been modified. And the thing with RNA in particular, RNA has the ability to reverse engineer your DNA. We saw this with COVID. This is one of the main points that is made in this article. We saw messenger RNA being reverse transcribed into human DNA. It's not everybody on the planet ever took a shot, but some of them have seen this effect. And it goes into the germline. In other words, your kids will inherit whatever you got at that point. So the business of reforming all life on the planet, not just the seeds, the plants, the fish, the birds, the animals, everything is being genetically engineered.
Indeed it is. Tonight is the State of the Union. We're going to be covering it live here at Worldview Tube and on Brandon House Live. We'll be covering it live. I haven't asked you. I should ask you privately, but I'm going to ask you publicly. Do you want to join me and comment as it goes down? You want to join me and provide color commentary, Patrick?
Let's try it.
Let's do it. All right. We got a yes on Patrick. He's technocracy.news. We're worldviewtube.com. And he's here each and every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central, I believe. Yep. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan, and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
An armed man who unlawfully entered the perimeter at Mar-a-Lago early this morning, at 1:30 this morning. The Associated Press is out with some new details right now. They have named, and we have confirmed the name of the suspect, 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin. According to the Associated Press in this bulletin that just crossed, he was reported missing by his family a few days ago. Investigators believe he headed south and picked up a shotgun along the way, and they think that because they found a box for the shotgun in his car. The FBI is right now asking people that live near Mar-a-Lago to check their doorbell cameras, check any cameras that they have in their yards, so they can figure out exactly how this guy got into the area. But it is now believed, according to the AP, that he might have piggybacked behind a vehicle entering Mar-a-Lago lawfully when the gate opened. For more on this right now, let's go to Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson. He is at the White House where President Trump was while this all unfolded overnight. Lucas.
Good morning, Peter. President Trump was at the White House this weekend. He was not in Palm Beach where this incident occurred, and the Secret Service says they were assisted by Palm Beach County deputies who assisted in shooting the suspect, as you mentioned, named 21-year-old Austin Martin of North.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, fellow Americans, welcome back to Training Tuesday on the Rob Maness Show live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, you know what? You just saw it. The latest would-be Trump assassin at Mar-a-Lago was shot and killed. Another radical threat taken off the board by our heroes and law enforcement. And that's not luck. That's the result of vigilance. And it's exactly why we train, prepare, and fight like our republic depends on it, because it does. Look, people, we're at war on multiple fronts right now. I'm going to have to go to more war every day of the week if I'm not careful. A cartel war on our southern border that's threatening Americans and the stability of the country of Mexico is, if you can even think about it that way, it's already unstable, including We're also, have the Somalia pipeline that's turned parts of Minnesota into the hotbed of fraud, gang activity, and welfare abuse. ICE is being attacked by a low-level insurgency that still isn't being dealt with appropriately. Our economy is improving rapidly, but the debt is still exploding past $37 trillion because of these endless foreign wars that we never should have been in the first place. And midterm races across the country are ground zero for this fight. It's more than just about the congressional seats. But here's the even better news. Americans are waking up, and we're pushing back hard. In the Texas primaries, voters are demanding a full ban on Sharia law in American courts. No more foreign legal systems on our soil. Oh, you don't believe me? It's happening, folks. The SAVE Act is gaining steam to finally guarantee only U.S. citizens can vote in our elections, but we got to keep the pressure on that Senate. And with the State of the Union tonight, President Trump is set to lay out the continuing battle plan to secure our people, keep the economy on the rise, and continue to put America first. And it's driving the anti-Americans crazy. I think 30 of those are going to boycott the SOTU tonight, and rightly so. They shouldn't even have seats in Congress if they're anti-American. Well, this is a training day, folks, because the deep state, the open border lobby, and the globalist warmongers and the Marxists never take a break, and they never rest, so neither can we. My guest today to discuss all this is veteran TV news producer, host of the Analyst Substack, former diplomat, and host of the Real American Sunrise Early Edition, and the brand new host of the NewsHour Weekend Edition on 77 Talk Radio, WABC in New York, Jake Novak. Jake, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Thanks for having me. You laid it out perfectly. We're at war on many fronts, but it's also a civil war. This reminds me of the Civil War when Abe Lincoln did roam freely and without a lot of protection in Washington, D.C. We know how that turned out, but it was understood. He couldn't go to the city of Baltimore. He couldn't go to the city of New York, by the way. Tremendous anti-Lincoln sentiment in New York City. So for the supporters of President Trump and President Trump himself, President Trump can go wherever he wants because we have better protection for our presidents now. Mm-hmm. But if you're a supporter of President Trump, it's dangerous out in some parts of the country. There's no other way to say it. You're being hunted. We're being hunted.
Yeah, I think Lincoln even arrested a New York congressman or something, if my memory serves me correctly. Some congressman, I think it was in New York, that really pissed him off. But the big thing was the draft, the conscription. Really upset folks quite a bit. That was the first time we've really seen it in large numbers like that in the first industrial war too. So yeah, I can understand that, be it from the South as I am.
Well, the problem is, like, a lot of people look at the history of New York City and they look at that draft riot in 1863 and they say, oh, that's when the city turned on the Union because there was all this violence. And sure, that played a role in it. But the truth is, it was, guess what, New York, it was the news media. The news media in New York, they called them the Copperhead Press. And they were against Lincoln from the beginning. They wanted a more traditional candidate. They didn't like an outsider being president, and on down the line. So it wasn't just the draft riot. Even before the draft riots, the news media elites in New York City were anti-Lincoln and were writing editorials against him and the war. So, just a footnote there for people who think it's just because of the horrible draft riot. Not true.
Yeah, absolutely. Just goes to show you that some things have never changed. The powerful like to keep their power and maintain the status quo in order to do that, and they'll go to great lengths in order to get that done. All right, so another assassin. The media's not really covering it. That clip I just showed you there was one of the few I could find from a news organization that had some extensive coverage on it, and that was the morning after it happened. This guy, he's 21 years old. An interesting report later in the day the next day was that his family reported him missing at 1:30 a.m. just before he showed up at 1:38 a.m. at Mar-a-Lago with the shotgun and the gasoline can. Something doesn't smell right, Jake. What do we know? Do we know anything else?
Yeah, there's evidence that he may have been another one of these people going through transgenderism. Again, so that makes, and this seems to be, by the way, it may not just be something that is going on with people who are having gender dysmorphia. It may have something to do with some of the drugs some of them are being taken. Is this, there really needs to be a question asked. Is this a side effect? And actually, there are even some liberals asking this question to their credit. Are there some side effects to some of these drugs that they give trans people that might be leading them to violence or schizophrenic type susceptibility to violent rhetoric? So that was one thing. It does seem to be that whatever the mental disorder, whatever the mental problems so many of our American people are having, it does seem like the enemies of America have figured out how to trigger this. Either if they're not triggering people specifically, it's such a wide net that they're casting, either on the internet or in some other cultural sounding boards, to make sure that those who might be susceptible to some type of violence against the president or violence against this government will be triggered in some way. We always keep looking for the specific trigger. Oh, did they have an individual email? Was it an individual phone call? Did someone provide them with the gun? Did someone provide them with intelligence? And of course, we want to know all those things. But I want to let everyone know we may not find that. What we may find is just that there's been a sustained drumbeat by some of our enemies, both in and outside this country, that they know will trigger a certain percentage of very mentally ill people. And I wonder if that's what's really going on here. And that would be easy enough actually to stop, frankly, because all we would need to do is to start looking at that messaging. It's pretty easy to find and look at that very closely, and then stop with anything like if there are drugs that are being given to these people that may have that kind of side effect, then we should then that's easy enough to outlaw them as well.
Well, the drugs are hormones. And we outlaw hormones, especially in young male athletes. We banned that because it has a tendency to not only give them big muscles and everything, but put a huge freeze on the muscle in between their ears, and it makes them violent. That's exactly what it does. It happens with weightlifters that are on hormones, body, whatever, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, those kind of guys. They get violent because they take too much of that stuff. So, yeah, of course, that's why we shouldn't be flipping doing it. It's crazy. Not to mention that gender dysphoria under the old DSM-5 is a valid mental illness disease that affects less than, I think, 0.3% of human beings. So it's a valid mental disease. And those that actually have it get the hormones. And, of course, they could go off the rails so much easier. It's nuts. It is absolutely nuts. This one is interesting. He's not quite as organized and resourced as the last two, Ruth and the other guy, Crooks, who had the indications that they had some training, some intelligence support, and some command and control support behind them. Of course, the resourcing with the firearms and those kind of activities and everything, but this one, he's probably just a whack job.
Yeah, and I think again, Europe has banned this kind of hormone treatment for young people and surgery for a long time because there's no financial incentive for it. I do want a financially incentivized healthcare system in this country. I actually do want that, but I would say one of the positives of not having a financial incentivized system in Europe is that they just don't have the incentive to start these surgeries and hormone drug treatments on young people or on really any people. I mean, honestly, there isn't a tremendous financial gain involved in there. So it's one of the biggest reasons why we have it here and they don't have it there.
Well, why do you think the media is not really covering this? I mean, if this was against Barack Obama in office, it would be nonstop 24/7.
Yeah, well, they abhor the idea of, for the news media and for the left in general, what's the highest level of heroism? Is it actually being a hero? Is it actually making a sacrifice for someone else? No. The highest level of heroism for the left is to be a victim. Victims are the be-all and end-all, which is why so many of them pretend to be victims. So many of them pull the Jussie Smollett routine, because to be a victim is even better than being a hero. You want to be a hero and be in the spotlight, and that's really what you want to do? Be my guest, go down and save some drowning children or clean up a drug park or something. That would be nice. That would be a good thing. Instead, for the left, being a victim is the biggest thing. So to portray President Trump as a victim or a potential victim in any incident whatsoever is very abhorrent to them. They'd rather say that he did something good on the economy than to say that he was a potential victim or a target of a violent act. They don't want to give him that because to them, that's the highest level in society, to be a victim, which is pathetic. I don't want to be a nation of victims. I don't like the culture of victimhood. I fight it in my own community all the time. The culture of victimhood is a very dangerous culture. It leads to no morality. It leads to no responsibility, and it's also pathetic. And it leads to no pride in oneself. But they love victimhood, and that's my biggest reason for this. We all know they don't like President Trump, but you have to flesh it out a little bit more than just saying they don't want to cover. Why don't they specifically want to cover that? And they might want to eventually, but not as long as he's perceived as a victim, they're not going to want to give him that.
Well, I'll be honest. I wasn't going to bring this up, but in the last 24 hours, as I've dug into the research in this particular incident a little bit more, I've seen a couple of independent lefty outlets actually making a victim of the shooter, the assassin. They leave out things like he raised the shotgun and pointed it at the officers who then shot him and killed him. They leave out those parts of the story, and portray him as just some guy that got lost at night in Mar-a-Lago and happened to get into the inner perimeter, and they shot him dead just for being an American walking around.
Well, that's
crazy.
When we have our soldiers, when they die in military sorties and things like that, we don't say they're victims. We say they were killed in action.
Yeah,
and
exactly
that's really important. They're not victims and that's the way the news media in this country thinks they are when they come back wounded or other ways inconvenienced. They look at them as pathetic victims as opposed to people who had a job to do, did the job, and then they may have had some injuries involved with it if they lived, and then maybe some of them died in action. But we don't say they're victims. We don't say that there were 8 victims. We don't say that there were 1,000 victims an hour at D-Day. We don't say the word victim. We say there were casualties.
That's right.
It's ridiculous. And that's what they do. That's what they just don't have the concept. Again, it's okay if you're not in the military. I wasn't in the military. It's okay if you're not absolutely being giving tens of thousands of dollars to veterans causes. It'd be nice if you did. We get it. But to not understand the lingo and the realities of it is unacceptable. It's a level of ignorance and illiteracy as an American that you should be ashamed of if you don't know the difference. If you can't look at an officer of the U.S. Army, Air Force, or Navy and know what their rank is, you should be ashamed of yourself. You really should. Yeah. You should know that in the Navy, 3 stripes is commander. You should know that in the Air Force and the Army, 2 bars is captain. If you don't know that by age 10, you should be ashamed of yourself. Not because you have to be one, but because you should have some literacy here.
I agree. And we're celebrating the Alamo this week. Lieutenant Colonel Travis's letter is being celebrated today. And a lot of these ninnies would probably say the men that died in the Alamo, of which Tennessee was the state with the largest number, that sacrificed themselves for Texas and America were victims, and they were not. They were absolute American heroes. We'll be right back with Jake Novak after this break.
All right, everybody, that wraps up the first segment of the Rob Maness Show live right here.
What if millions around the world could access Bible teaching and worldview training for free right now without hitting a paywall? That's exactly what happens every day at worldviewtube.com because of the Worldview Weekend Foundation. We don't lock our live stream behind PayPal. We don't restrict our content to members only. Instead, the Worldview Weekend Foundation helps cover the cost of delivering free educational and ministry programming to people across the nation and around the world. And it's not just programming. My Sunday night church service, where I taught verse by verse through Revelation for 18 months, and now I am teaching through the book of Daniel, is made possible through the support of our church, Worldview Weekend Foundation. If you believe this kind of truth-centered biblical teaching must continue, donate today. Go now to worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address and phone number there if you'd rather give by phone or mail. That's worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you.
What's your over-under on the number of Democrats who stand up and applaud Team USA?
All of them that are there, because the real radicals are not going to be there. So the radical left in the House are 100% dependent on radical left money. So they're not really people with an independent point of view on anything. They do what they're told. And they were told to get out of the mall and do another State of the Union, the People's State of the Union, whatever stupid thing they came up with. So they're not going to be there. All of these bomb throwers, Trump haters. The other Democrats have to stand. They would hurt themselves dramatically if they don't.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and today is State of the Union Day. And we've already seen Team USA's men's hockey team get on the Air Force 757 and flew from Florida and have landed at Joint Base Andrews already. My guest today is the host of the brand new News Hour weekend edition on 77 Talk Radio WABC. Jake Novak. Sorry, Jake, I had to read that off because I want to get it right for folks. And there's a free app for WABC, right, Jake? That where you can go that and get all of the programming, right?
Yeah. You can go on WABC.com. You can just do it over the regular internet, but you can get the app to make it easier and get all the programming, and you can see the archive shows. I've done 4 already. I've actually done a couple of other things. I've done several shows so far in just this month. So all there archived, and you can critique me all you like. That's okay.
That's fantastic. Hey, everybody loves your Real American Sunrise, early Sunrise edition. And I can see that they're going to love the show, too, because you do good work. You do good work, and you care about what you do, and you care about this business, but you care about the American people, man. That's why I love having you on. Look, State of the Union tonight. What are we going to hear from the president? Yeah, he's going to have the hockey team stand up, and I think he's going to honor a fighter pilot, Navy fighter pilot, unfortunately, but a fighter pilot that should have had the Medal of Honor from Korea. They got in a dogfight, 7 Russian jets and pilots on 1 Navy fighter pilot. He shot, I think, 4 of them down and was still able to recover on the aircraft carrier, and they had to push the airplane over the side. This guy's going to be amazing, Commander Williams. So I know he's going to do that, but what are we going to hear from a policy perspective tonight, you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, again, just to be fair and to be as unbiased, not about being unbiased, just being as honest as I possibly can. With the exception of these kinds of moments that you just talked about when we salute some amazing Americans who end up in the gallery and things like that, I can't stand the State of the Union address. I don't care who the president is. I find this to be a tremendous waste of time and lack of focus and things like that. I wish we could just have a honoring our heroes night, where the president would honor these heroes and then we would say goodnight. That said, look, the president's going to focus mostly on the economy, and he's going to talk about some of these macro numbers, which are undeniable, objective good numbers. We have American average earnings up well over 13% since he took office. We have oil and gas prices down significantly since he took office. We do have net gains of jobs of something like 350,000. I'd like to see more than that, certainly in a year. But remember, we've had warnings of job Armageddon since he took office, especially after the tariffs, and that hasn't happened. So that's a good point. Like, we're not losing jobs. Plus, we're losing population. We've deported a lot of people, and a lot of people have self-deported, and we've eliminated a lot of government jobs. So take that 360 or so net new jobs number and double or triple it, really. Because every government job that's eliminated is usually a private sector job that is either created or money in the tax in our taxes that isn't being taken out so that we can create a job. And then we have all these illegal aliens that have been deported or left the country. So he's going to talk about all those things. Colonel, I hope he also talks about some of the things that that he didn't talk about, like at the end of the year. If this ends up being a replay of what he did at the end of December when he talked about all the economic successes, that'll be fine. But he really needs to look forward more, which a couple of things to really, really hit on tonight, and I hope he hits on. One is, Americans are going to get, and probably are starting to get already, really big tax refunds. And that's usually not the greatest thing. That means you lent the government free money for an entire year. But in this case, because so much of the tax regime was changed after the signing of the one big beautiful bill, the big bill, I don't blame anyone for getting a bigger refund this year because it was hard to calculate that. The other thing in taxes that the president should really talk about is this 100% depreciation deduction that any business can take starting from anything that they bought for their business at the beginning of this year, which will make buying a number of pieces of equipment and expanding business a lot cheaper for a lot of companies, especially smaller companies. I hope he really hits that home because I think there's a lot of businesses that don't know about this yet, let alone are using it yet. And of course, he should talk about the Trump accounts and the way that he should talk about Trump accounts. And again, I don't pretend to give advice to President Trump. Don't listen to me and think, oh, Jake thinks he knows what he's going to tell the president. I'm just saying what I would wish if someone did listen to me. I don't know if anyone does, but the way I would say it is like, I would say it almost like a Democrat. It's not fair that only people who work in jobs that give 401ks can take advantage of these kinds of retirement and long-term savings plans. What I have done with the Trump accounts is at birth allowed every American to get the same kind of matching fund, tax-free savings account for their children, just like the corporations do, just like rich people do. And that is the way that I hope he presents it. If he doesn't, then let the other Republicans should present it that way. These are really game-changing type policies the president should talk about tonight. Yes, and listen, we're talking on the Colonel Rob Maness show. I do hope he talks a little bit about what we're going to do with some of our foreign enemies, particularly Iran, just to make sure the American public is informed. But from what I'm hearing, there's not going to be a lot of talk about that. We could be wrong. And because it's President Trump, it's going to go long. So maybe he will get to some of these other topics.
He doesn't usually admit that he's going to talk a long time, but he did this time. So it must be going to go really long. Yeah, I agree with you. I hope he does talk about a little bit, touch on the successes in peace that he's had and the challenges remaining and his thoughts on how to get that done. Because, we see the little Ukrainian dude out there just yesterday. He irritates me, and he goes out in the media and says, well, the only way we can win is if we have American air power and ground troops on the ground, and we're not going to quit. What? I mean, I'm paraphrasing him now, but that's essentially what he said. I'm like, what are you thinking, man? You're going to continue to get hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians killed. Eventually, there will be no state of Ukraine. It'll be a county in the Russian Federation. That's what I think is going to happen if he doesn't stop. Because America's not going to roll in.
It's such a quagmire. It's such a quagmire in every single way. It feels like everyone got involved. You mentioned the Korean War earlier and that hero pilot. Mm-hmm. I wrote a senior thesis for my seniors. That's as close to combat as I ever got. And I'm just kidding. I actually got a little closer than that. But as a senior in college, I wrote a senior thesis. And my senior thesis was how the Korean War was actually a big loser for everyone involved. The myth that this gave the North Koreans some kind of juice isn't true. It was a loser for the Chinese. It was a loser in some ways for the Russians for whatever involvement they had. And it was a loser for us. And this it really reminds me of the Ukraine situation. This is a lose-lose for everyone. There's not, in my opinion, no one, not even some of the petty arms dealers, I mean, other than them, I guess, is really winning out of this thing. So let's find a way to step away.
Yeah, I mean, that thing's cost us trillions of dollars, and now you have a South Korean government that's turning towards the communists more and more every day. We should get the heck out of there. Let that chips fall where they may. The economy's great in South Korea. They're very strong militarily. If they don't want to be our friend, then we should not be expending all of this treasure. And we still get people killed and injured in that business, even in training over there. So that's my opinion on it. But I'm sure that my friends on the right that are establishment guys and gals are not going to like what I said, but it's just the truth, man. It's the truth, Jake. Do you think, to go back to the economy and the Trump accounts, my number 3 son had a baby girl this year, so they're very ecstatic. They said they set the account up for him when she was born and everything, and they're very happy about it. Do you think that young parents are eventually, before this president's term is up, going to be able to see over the horizon that maybe someday they'll be able to buy a new home, closer to in age to what their parents were able to do, and maybe even have a single income family that's income that's able to survive, and that, or is that just pie in the sky?
No, it's not, because, love or hate these guys on Wall Street and people who understand investments, they're really, really smart, and they find ways to squeeze out value from things. It's a great scenario you just kind of alluded to there for a second. What if you have a husband and wife, and let's say the wife is earning more money in her job, and the husband works part-time or is a little bit more of the caretaker at home? I'm just throwing that as a scenario. It'll probably be the other way around in most cases, but you get my point. And what if the value that non-full-time working spouse brings is that they're still contributing to a Trump account that they've had since birth? And the banks will be able to lend money based on not only the spouse who's making the bigger income and assets, but also the assets that have been building in the non-fully working spouse. And I would hope to see more banks making loans against the value of some of these accounts, knowing that that these will be less risky borrowers. And this should be something that lower income Americans get. As long as if you do it from day one, even if you're a lower income family and you're starting to get into that house buying mode of your life in your 30s, after 30 years, there should be a decent nest egg in there, not to take the money out of, but to borrow against. The banks, you have an asset that you otherwise didn't have. I work with young people here in New York area all the time, and they come to me and they say, Jake, you work at CNBC all the time. I know that the path towards the American dream is home ownership, but I can't afford a home anywhere in the New York area. And I say, do you have friends and relatives who live somewhere else where you could buy an investment property? Just because you're not living in the home doesn't mean you don't get the advantages. So the same thing here. Just because you don't have a high income, and just because you're only going to be donating maybe a few $100s a month to your Trump account over and above what it makes in investments, in its investment growth, you're going to come into a situation in the home owning years, home buying years, I should say, of your 30s, maybe late 30s, and you'll have something to show the banks as major collateral into investment. It could be a real game changer for people. And for the people who are very libertarian about it, I understand your arguments, but let's get rid of the things that government does that are entirely negative before we worry about something like this that has a lot of positives.
Yeah, exactly. Like I told my son, I said, hey, if you open a Trump account for your 4-year-old daughter, that you don't get the money from the government, but you can put money in it now and put $50 a month in for the baby that's already got the $1,000 and $100 a month in for the 4-year-old. And by the time they're 30, they're going to have a great nest egg there. And that's never been possible before. And it will take the place of being able to buy a home earlier and maybe help reset that table. We got to take another break, Jake. When we come back, I want to talk about what's going on in Texas with these primaries, because a lot of it is about banning Sharia law. We'll be right back with Jake Novak.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Over the next 5 days, early voting in Texas' Republican primary will wrap up. Typically, most voters will cast their ballots early. Consequently, those who didn't do so last week, as well as those who will on Election Day, March 3rd, must know that there's more at stake than a number of hotly contested races at the top of the ballot. At its very end is perhaps the single most important choice on any ballot anywhere in the country this election year. That's Proposition 10. Its entire contents are, quote, Texas should prohibit Sharia law, unquote. Prop 10 is neither law nor binding, but it offers Republican voters and others who can vote in this open primary a momentous choice. Ban Sharia or allow Sharia ultimately to ban freedom in Texas, with momentous implications for that state and the rest of the country. BanSharia.com.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and my guest today is Jake Novak, new host of a new weekend news show on WABC Radio, and it's fantastic. You can also go to WABC's website, get the app for free, and put it on your phone. You can listen to it anywhere or on the website. And Jake, that was Frank Gaffney from with his Secure Freedom Minute. And he's leading an effort along with Steve Bannon to ban Sharia law in Texas, because there are actually two Sharia courts operating in the Dallas-Fort Worth greater metro area and counties that have decided on thousands and thousands of cases, in spite of the current governor, banning groups and calling them terrorists like CARE and the Council on American Islamic Relations. And of course, the Muslim Brotherhood, their backers and founders. Do you think this law could pass?
I think it could. Listen, I'd be scoring cheap points with your viewership if I said, yeah, I support this, and I do. I do think we should ban the efforts, especially that we're seeing in Texas, But what I want to do for your viewers and anyone else who's watching this, or maybe there'll be some clips taken out of it, is to explain why this is not religious persecution or some kind of bigotry in any way. Some people might say, well, wait a minute. My church has rules. We, for example, with marriage. Sure, there's civil marriage, but my church chooses to consecrate certain marriages and not others. And you're married in my church. In Jewish law, there is the laws of Jewish divorce and marriage. Now, here's the difference. What goes on in your church and in your synagogue and in your Jewish community does not have any bearing on the civil law. I don't care how religious a rabbi you are, you could be the most Hasidic rabbi with the blackest hat and the longest beard. Mm-hmm. You do not perform a wedding ceremony until you also see the civil marriage certificate. That's been the case in this country for 250 years, okay? Mm-hmm. That's the way it goes. Same thing with divorces. Religious Jewish couples will not remarry someone unless they see a religious divorce. But you must also get a civil divorce. And there's not one rabbinic court in America that will grant a religious divorce unless they see proof that at least the process of your civil divorce has begun. Now, what's going on with these Sharia groups is they literally want to have control over real estate transactions, other types of schools, all kinds of other things that aren't necessarily that are civil law. And this is not to be allowed. We can't have that. That is a secondary law. It could lead to it has led to some serious problems in states like Texas. And it's not the way of a religious pluralism. Both Christians and Jews have embraced, or at least accepted, the idea for centuries that they should be able to live in places even if they don't have a religious leader who's the same as theirs, their same religion. They can figure out a way to live in peace. Muslims, for the most part, have not figured this out. They don't accept this yet. This is where the Christians were 500 years ago and where Jews were 2,100 years ago. So we both, and Barack Obama made a big point of that, as if it was like yesterday. Remember, he said, well, the Christians were the Crusader. Barack, that was like 600 years ago. Granted, you're right, but 600 years, give me a little credit. That's a good 600-year track record. Even the Raiders in the early years didn't have that many winning seasons. I mean, what are you talking about? So, yes, I will grant that 600 years ago, Christians were in the same place and Jews were in the same place 2,100 years ago. But that's a long time. I don't know anybody anywhere near that old, right? So, I mean, all kidding aside, this has to be stopped. But I think all of us watching know that we want to ban this kind of stuff. But to tell your friends and relatives and say, like, that's bigoted, I think, no, wait a minute. This is not the same thing. This is not like telling a church they can't consecrate a wedding. This is not like telling a Jewish rabbinic court that they can't do a divorce. That's not what this is. This is them getting involved in all kinds of civil laws and proceedings that go way beyond religious practice. This is like mob. This is like actually the best metaphor, the best example of this is like the mafia having its own justice. That's what this is trying to do.
Yeah, I think Governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, got in trouble for talking about these no-go zones in Europe, Muslim areas where non-Muslims weren't allowed to go, and that's because they established Sharia law in those areas, and you're not allowed to come in and be like a sidewalk preacher for Christianity in a no-go zone if that is allowed to exist. And it's, as I say all the time to my viewers, Islam is not a religion. It's a government ideology and political ideology, and it's a form of governance. I mean, they even want to get into the banking system, as you mentioned, loans, real estate, marriage, divorce laws that are more than just a religious test kind of law, but if you start implementing Sharia law and allowing adherents to go to that, I mean, you're talking about honor killings that, although they happen now, they're still fairly rare in the United States, and they're illegal. But that would all of that approach would be legalized. Why do you think Texas is showing the biggest amount of symptoms of this? We know it's happening in places like New York City. Mamdani is now in control there. Didn't go to the new Catholic bishop's inauguration. Went this weekend and to a mosque and did the Muslim prayer thing and had government officials doing it too at an event. But why Texas?
Well, it wasn't just a mosque; it was a mosque connected to pro-Iranian, a pro-Iranian imam, and has been Iranian funded. Well, the easiest answer, and there are a couple of answers, but the first and foremost answer about Texas is very simple: mathematics, Colonel. Texas has had a major influx of people going into that state. It's one of the biggest population plus states of the last 20, 30 years in this country, actually longer than that, probably 50, 60 years in this country. And you get more people and you get more different strokes and different folks. I mean, that's the first reason. The second reason is the people in Texas has a very hands-off type state government. Check it out. The governor of Texas has some of the least powers of any governor in any state in America. That's a constitutional thing in Texas. I'm not making a positive or negative comment about that. I'm just saying Texas has a hands-off approach, especially to groups with certain religious with religious groups. And so I think this was a state that had a lot of respect and wanted to be hands-off on religion, which I think is a great sentiment. But the Muslim groups saw that as a weakness and took advantage of it. So those are the two best answers. This is similar to the old argument of like, we have great civil liberties in this country, but what do we do when we have enemies who know very, very well that we aren't a repressive nation, we aren't a fascist nation, and they're going to take advantage of our best nature? How do we deal with that? We talked about President Lincoln at the top of the show. President Lincoln suspended the right of habeas corpus, the writ of habeas corpus throughout the Civil War. It's still a very hotly debated topic. My old colleague, Judge Napolitano's head still explodes when we talk about that. But I think there's some good reasons for that. There were spies and enemies all over the country. And to give them the same due process that they had in peacetime would have been ruinous. So these people know that, and so they know about that, about the United States in general, but they also know that Texas had these kinds of rules. Utah would have been one of their targets as well. But remember, Utah in recent decades has started to crack down on some of the splinter Mormon groups, and they tightened up their religious freedoms in that state. And I think that the Muslims probably took a good look at Utah and realized they were too late on that one. But I think that they went through some loopholes in Texas, but of course, still the biggest reason is they just got a huge number of people, Colonel, and that's they're going to be good and bad with those kind of huge numbers.
Exactly right. Well, we got a question from the audience. Let's go ahead and take that before we get to the break. Go ahead, Shel.
Sir Jake, I have a question here about the governorship. Why isn't there any term limits in the state of Texas for governor? Would that not solve some of these problems?
Well, it's the trade-off. You're on the right track. Maybe if they had term limits and in return for the term limits, they gave the governor's office there more constitutional powers, we would be in a better place. We all know a lot of people from Texas who tell you that there is so much splintering within the Republican Party there. And that has a lot to do with the fact that there isn't as strong a hand as you have, for example, with the Governor DeSantis, or even a Governor Newsom in California. He's got a lot of power. I mean, the California governor has a tremendous amount of power in that state. So I think that the answer is that's that trade-off. Maybe they felt like, well, we weren't as worried about term limits for our governor in the state because they don't have the kind of powers that many other governors have. So maybe they need to make that switch again and say, you know what, let's invest in our governor more power in return for the term limits.
Yeah, it's one of the weakest governorships, I think, in the country, the state of Texas is. But it's also a fairly fractured Republican Party there, too, which exhibits itself in the State House, especially the House of Representatives, where the speakers are generally squishes, and they appoint Democrats as committee chairs. And that happens in Mississippi, too, I think. So I think we've got some work to do there. From a candidate perspective, are you watching any of the candidate races?
Well, obviously, the Senate race has been really interesting because of what happened in the news media last week with this whole Stephen Colbert thing and Tallarico versus Crockett. The news media is really trying to push this narrative that if Ken Paxton wins the primary, somehow the Republicans are going to lose the Texas Senate race. I don't believe that. I don't believe that there's going to be any net loss, especially if Crockett wins the primary, which he's still, I think, the favorite to win. So honestly, that's a real. There are so many news media narratives that just need more honesty today. Just to go back to the State of the Union for a second, all the polls show that Americans feel more optimistic about their personal finances than they have in a couple of years. It's still too low. It's something like 39% of Americans are positive about their personal economic situation. But when you ask all Americans what you think about the economy overall, the numbers are lower. So what, of course, is the news media focusing on? Are they focusing on the fact that people are feeling better than they have in 2 years? Or are they focusing on the fact that people are looking at it and saying, I'm concerned? Hey, I'm concerned too. We don't know how AI is going to affect some big names out there. I mean, who isn't concerned? But my personal finances, are they better than they were a year ago? Yeah, they are. So same thing with this. Is Paxton and Cornyn an ugly battle? And yes, it is. But does somebody like Tallarico or Crockett have a chance in heck of winning? I mean, they've been doing this ever since that guy, that Latino guy, ran against Phil Gramm in the 1996 Senate race, if you recall that race. And they thought this was the second coming because he actually was a Vietnam vet. And they're not going to win. They're not going to win these statewide elections. Beto O'Rourke was the best example, and he did make it close. But he only made it close because Ted Cruz had been so late to the Trump party. So same thing here. I think that's the one thing I'm looking at really closely, because you're seeing that false media narrative. And I almost feel sorry for them. It's like Linus with the Great Pumpkin. Here we go again with the Democrat who's going to win the Senate race in Texas. And the Great Pumpkin isn't coming. Go out and trick or treat, kids. Great Pumpkin's not coming.
Or Lucy with the football. Cornyn's so weak, though. He's taken the narrative up. I just saw a tweet before I came on the show. Oh, it's bad. If Paxton wins, we're gonna. It'll be a terrible time for Republicans in Texas. It's unbelievable. And they're even attacking the governor's candidate, the retired Green Beret doc, Pete Chambers. They're attacking him as if he's got as much money as Greg Abbott. I'm thinking Abbott's in trouble for some reason in this Texas primary. I'd vote for Chambers if I was over there for sure, because Abbott's just a little bit too globalist for my taste. But we got to take one more break, Jake. When we come back, I want to talk about the SAVE Act. What's going on with it? Why is it stuck? It's driving me a little nuts, and I think the president too. We'll be right back with Jake Novak.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
I also believe that with a bill this popular, we really owe it to the American people when we consider it to make any senators wishing to filibuster to actually speak. They shouldn't be able to filibuster while they're napping. They shouldn't be able to filibuster while they're at the Munich Security Conference. Filibuster in this circumstance should require them to go to the Senate floor, seek recognition, and start speaking until they are no longer able. That's how we ought to get this thing passed, and I think we need to.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday. We're going touching a lot of different subjects, but they're all linked together. Really, it's about American life, American culture, and what's going to be successful or not. And the SAVE Act has the ability, in my opinion, to reset the table from an election security, election integrity perspective for the United States and put us back on the high ground that we used to hold when people around the world looked to us for how to run free and fair elections, and we no longer occupy that, and we need to say back. My guest today is Jake Novak, host of the new News Hour Weekend Edition on 77 WABC Talk Radio out of New York. Jake, why do you think Thune's not letting this thing get voted on? It's gotten out of committee already.
You know, there are a decent number of Republicans, I'll call them indecent, who still believe that the best case scenario for them personally, Republicans in the Senate especially, is to go back to the era of 2012, 2016, where Mitch McConnell had mostly, he had there was a major Republican majority in the House. They didn't quite have it in the Senate until 2014. And they thought that was the golden era for Republicans. All they had to do was oppose a president, oppose his policies. They got plenty of TV appearances. They got massive donations, especially from corporations. And they didn't have to do anything. They didn't actually have to show their work. All they had to do was say, well, we're in opposition. And when things didn't go their way, they said, well, can't beat the president, doesn't have a veto. We don't have a veto-proof majority. And then they just played that game. They're completely oblivious to the fact that that world is gone. The Democrats are radically different since then. The Republican voting base feels very different about a lot of issues, but they're still hoping for that. And they believe that keeping the elections the way they are, making sure that everyone has a little duchy. They're almost like the lords before the forced signing of the Magna Carta by King John. They sort of figure, we'll have our little duchy here. I'll get this state, I'll have this committee, I'll have this, that, and the other thing, and we have to allow some of the other lords to get what they want, and we're all happy. We're sort of divvying up this country like a bunch of lords. And that is just never acceptable. It never has been acceptable. It's really not acceptable now. And it's again, just like, I mean, this is a real, forget about forcing the standing filibuster, which I really support. It's a great idea because it's a way of defeating the filibuster without destroying the filibuster. It's really a great, it's really a great solution. But we got to get there. And we got to get Thune to allow it. We got to get Mitch McConnell to allow it to get out of committee. And of course, the other answer to your question, Rob, is the same thing that we saw with John McCain with the Obamacare replacement vote back when in 2018, I believe it was, or at least late 2017, 2018. There are some petty, selfish, absolutely maniacally arrogant members of the Republican Party who are just angry and resentful that they are not the president, that their branch of republicanism isn't what took hold. And, you know, I could be one of those guys. When I was the senior editorial columnist for CNBC, I was writing at least 30% of what I was writing is absolutely contrary to the Trump agenda. And there's some of those things I've changed my mind about. Some of them I haven't. It's okay for me to have a disagreement with the president about something. But as soon as May of 2016 rolled around, I realized two things. One, that Trump was going to win, and I was the only mainstream, full-time mainstream journalist who called the election for Trump, and I did at the end of May of 2016. But the second thing I did was I realized I was wrong about some things. I was wrong about a couple of the issues out there and how to handle them, et cetera, et cetera. And these people have no humility. John Kasich has no humility. John McCain had no humility. Mitch McConnell has no humility. And there are, I could keep naming some names. Some of them aren't elected officials, thankfully, but they're still influencers within the party. Bill Kristol. There's no humility there. There's no understanding that they weren't connecting. Not only were they not connecting Colonel with the mainstream Republican voters, they weren't connecting with anyone. Who the hell's their base? I have no idea. But here's a real stark example for something that 80% of the American people want, and for the Senate to drag its feet on even voting on it is the worst indictment of our representative republic that I can ever remember. I really can. This is worse than things like the Civil War and stuff like that, because there was genuine division in our country about that kind of stuff. There's no division about this. This is just a political class which doesn't care about this because they figured out a way to keep their power, whether the elections have integrity or not, and the rest of us. And it's probably the most egregious example we've ever seen. And I can understand a lot of people losing faith in politics and in our government and in our country over this. So I hope that some of these senators who are slowing this down, Mitch McConnell especially, he's really the main culprit right now. Learn some humility. I'm not holding my breath though.
Yeah, it's kind of like this debate over digital voting machines. There are some state government officials that are just so arrogant or so wedded to the idea that you can't do it by hand, even though we did it for over 200 years in massive elections. Okay, you can do paper ballots on Tuesday in November and have them hand counted and have a result by midnight that night. You can do that even today with the population we have, but they're so arrogant. They're so arrogant that they refuse to realize the train has left the station for the American people, and we're on it. They're not.
And, when I sit down with some people, and I don't know a lot, thankfully, I don't know a lot of people like this, but, I was in D.C. for a while in my youth, and so I know some people who think this way. And when I sit down with them and they give me this heartfelt argument that, like, look, we're right, this is the better way to go, and just because most of the people want it, there are certain levels of stewardship that should be granted to the government so that the people don't make a mistake. If you're talking about a life or death issue, I'm willing to listen. But this is more like the VHS versus beta argument. Was beta better? And for those of you old enough to remember, was beta a better technology and a better quality? Yes. Yeah. But the people wanted VHS because it was a little bit cheaper, and there was so and there were people as late as 30 years ago who were still saying, "Oh, those dumb people who didn't choose beta." Honestly, that's what you're so upset about? No one died because VHS won. There's not going to be anyone who's going to die if we go to, let's say you're right. Let's just say you're right, and I don't think you are. But let's say you're right, and digital voting is the way to go, and the way that we vote now by mail is the way to go for better. Again, I think it's egregiously wrong. But even if you're right, so is that really going to make that much of a difference if we tell people and get them into the habit of getting an ID and voting in person? No, it won't. This isn't like, oh, Americans are going to start drinking uranium. We must take away their freedoms. That's not what's happening here. And, but they pretend like that because that's the way it is with everything, and people don't want to give up their power over us.
Absolutely. Well, let's take our last question. We've got a question in the audience. Make it fast, Liz.
Okay, it's going to be fast. How is it that with the fact that our governor, and I'm using that term loosely, has not as much power, but yet he's managed to give the Islamic Muslims billions of dollars already?
Liz is from Texas.
Yeah, well, there you go. He doesn't have a lot of legislative power, but he's got the power. Every governor's got some money they can throw around, and when they don't have the legislative power, they use the power of they use green mail, as they used to say, money. It's as simple as that. That's what's dangerous about governors who don't have a lot, or any politician who doesn't really have specific powers. That's why senators are such a menace. All they really do is either ratify treaties and advise and consent on certain on appointments, and maybe vote, and vote on war stuff. And those three things don't happen every day. Otherwise, they just talk and talk and talk. At least the people in the House have to prepare budgets, and they have more specific responsibilities, even though they're the lower house. So they end up doing all kinds of nasty stuff.
Yeah. Well, our politics has got to change, but I don't have the answers for it. before we get to the end of the show here, I'll get your take on this if you're willing to give it. There's a dust up between Turning Point USA and the folks running Doc Pete Chambers, the retired Green Beret for governor and everything. And it appears that it's all about money. Money continues to drive power, and Americans. This is my view. Americans, you don't have to vote for the person that has the most money. Stop doing it. Anyway, your take on that? I mean, do you have any answers to how we could change this?
I think that we should shorten the cycle. The argument against telling people you can't donate a lot of money to a campaign is saying that's taking away your free speech. I understand that argument. So let's change it. Let's change it on another platform. Let's shorten the amount of time. If there's only a 2 or 3 month period where donations can be made with the same caps that we have now, then you can't argue, well, you didn't give me my free speech in this election. Well, the election was only 3 months, sir. Sorry. So let's absolutely shorten the amount of time when donations can be made. Obviously, there'll be a lot of electioneering behind the scenes, but no one who has big money is going to throw their money years and years before an election the way that they will when it's really crunch time. We need to shorten our election cycles drastically in this country. That will help. Again, not going to take the money out, but that will help lower that influence of money and keep the suspense aspect of things going for a much longer time. So that's my solution. Yeah.
That's a great idea. All right, man. We got about 45 seconds left, Jake. Tell folks what they can continue to expect on your brand new show and everything else you're doing and where to find it one more time.
Well, it's a show early in the morning, Saturday and Sunday morning. It starts at 5 a.m. You don't have to wake up at that time. You can listen to the archive. It is much more of a news-based program. I will not be doing analysis every 5 seconds. There's going to be plenty of analysis, but it'll be quick. There's going to be very high story counts. I did about 25 stories in my first hour, more than that the second, and it'll be like a one-word or one-sentence comment about each story as we move on. It'll be very New York-centric, but of course I'll have some national stories. Later in the day, starting in a few months, I'll also be doing a financial news program on WABC Radio that will be much more what you're used to from me, a lot more analysis. And then look for me during the week on WABC Radio. Instead of, when you listen to your favorite talk radio host and then they toss to the national news at the top of the hour and we have to listen to those national news, mainstream news media, people that we just bash for the rest of the hour. We're not going to do that at WABC. It's going to be people like me telling you what we think the top story is and schmoozing with the host. That's going to start soon, too. And that alone, I think, will be a relief to all of you.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Great show once again, my friend. Tomorrow, Whistleblower Wednesday, Federal Air Marshal Representative Sonia Labasco. It should be a good one. I haven't had her on the show before, but I've been following her a long time. She has really done a lot of good work on behalf of the Federal Air Marshals. I'll see you then.